This training session was all about conditioning the bridge. So as it was this horse's first time doing any sort of clicker training, I just wanted to begin the foundations and prevent any mugging behaviour. So every time she turned her head away and was in the desired position, I marked the behaviour wanted by clicking my tongue and then rewarding with a feed. And I repeated this a few times just so that she began to understand it. I then started introducing some very basic target training with a homemade target. I did this by using classical conditioning, using my voice to say the word target as a cue, and then rewarded using positive reinforcement by feeding her pony nuts. This was repeated a few times for associative learning and then finished on a good note, as it was one of the very first sessions, and she was rewarded with a jackpot of scratches and treats at the end. She actually responded quite well to scratches, so it could be used as the main positive reinforcement for future training sessions. And then she was just habituated a little bit to a different environment, ready to start training in a different area. Then onto this pony, I began the same way by conditioning the bridge, just getting him understanding my cues and respecting, not mugging. So that was using classical conditioning again of the vocal cue and positive reinforcement, feeding him as a reward. This pony had done a small amount of training previously, so I began reintroducing the target training a little bit more. Again, the same process as the previous pony, and he picked it up relatively well. I was able to produce the target in different places, different positions, and he responded quite well. If I didn't get the response I wanted straight away, like here, it took him a moment. I just waited and then made sure that the click was marking the behaviour at the exact moment that I wanted it to. He was also taking into holding to do some training, so I began just walking him around, habituating him to the environment and just getting him used to the arena. I did some walk to halt and halt to walk transitions to see how he responded, and for this I used negative reinforcement. So when he responded to my cue of halting, I released the rein pressure, and I also used positive reinforcement, rewarding him with a little scratch. I was just getting a bit of an idea of how he was responding to my cues and what he generally thought of the environment. Here he displayed some mouth displacement of trying to put his reins in his mouth and chew them. So I ignored the behaviour that I didn't want. So then I began to start teaching head down. I began using classical conditioning, placing my hand on his poll as a posture cue to encourage him to put his head down, and then when he responded, released it. So negative reinforcement, releasing that pressure. I also used positive reinforcement, encouraging him with pony nuts. He responded well to them. He's a very food-centred pony, so the positive reinforcement with that worked quite nicely. So here I was using a handheld clicker, but for some of the other training I did just click my tongue, and both of them, the horses responded to both of them. So it was good to habituate them to two different types of marker. Although I started teaching the head down and he responded quite well to it, I decided for the rest of the session introducing a bit of target training would be more beneficial for my assignment. So again, with the pony from before, I marked the behaviour that I wanted following the vocal cue of saying the word target. He didn't understand at first. There was a few miscommunications, so I just ignored the behaviour that I didn't want. And then when he touched the target, I marked it by clicking and then rewarded him using positive reinforcement from the pony nuts. Again, ignoring the behaviours that I didn't want, like here he lifts his leg up, that's quite common for him, so I just ignored that. And then if he didn't seem to understand it, I asked the question slightly differently, and I'd make it a bit easier to try and help him achieve what I was asking. So I'd bring the target a bit closer and make sure that he was able to achieve it. And then he picked it up quite quickly. I was able to put the target in different places and he got the hang of it quite quickly. So then I made it a bit different. I put him behind a barrier and then moved the target around to like slightly different positions, above, to the side, just to ask him some more questions, using the same principles that I'd been following before. And he responded really well to it. He took it in quite quickly and gave me the results that I was wanting. So again, this was using both operant conditioning and classical conditioning, with the operant conditioning being the positive reinforcement of rewarding with the pony nuts, and the classical conditioning being the voice cue, which I was using for the target. So this helped him associate the cue of my voice with the behaviour that I wanted, and then associating the click that marked the desired behaviour with the reward. So when I clicked, he knew to anticipate feed. So then, to mark the end of the training session, he received a jackpot of lots of pony nuts to make sure he knew that the training session had finished. So I followed the exact same principle with this horse too. He hadn't done anything like this before, so I started slowly and just introduced it. He was actually really clever and picked it up pretty quickly. I decided to do some of the training in the stable because I wanted to compare how differently they'd respond in their stable, which is their normal environment that they're habituated to, and an arena that they have been habituated to but don't spend as much time in. So I was intrigued to see how differently they'd respond, and also away from other distractions like other horses. Because this horse picked it up so quickly, I went into his stable and I used the same method but put the target in different places to kind of ask more questions and get him to use his brain a little bit more. He was very clever and picked it up pretty quickly. What would be good for him to develop this further would be bringing the target round to his side, like this, but further to get him to stretch, which would be really beneficial for him, especially as he's currently being rehabbed for kissing spines. So this would be a use of clicker training and target training that would actually benefit him. This horse has quite a character, so again, when he displayed behaviour that wasn't particularly helpful or I didn't want, I ignored it until he gave me the behaviour that I wanted, and I marked it and rewarded it. Target. So again, if he didn't understand it, I just waited until he gave me the response that I wanted, and we just repeated this for a little while. So he would associate the behaviour with the cues and then obviously the reward, and he picked it up pretty quickly. He was really good. And then was rewarded with lots of scratches at the end and feed. He's responds well to both scratches and food as a reward, so both of them are useful for his training sessions. So I can put this as the jackpot reward at the end. So when rewarding with the positive reinforcement of pony nuts, I made sure that I tried to feed centrally, so I'd put my hand out in front and make sure that his head was centred and not mugging me. We used 2 different types of targets. During the earlier training, it would be useful to keep the same so that the horse can associate, and it helps their learning. But as they develop and get a better understanding of the target training, it would be good to introduce different objects as the target. So I've put some examples of the behaviour that I do not want. So most of these were a miscommunication or due to my cues and timing being wrong. So this was in the beginning where I was getting to grips with how to ask for the behaviour that I wanted, and the ponies were starting to understand how to do it. So if there was behaviour that I didn't want, or I didn't get the answer that I wanted straight away, I ignored the negative behaviour, and if they still didn't understand it, I asked the question slightly differently, to make it achievable. Oh, you're cute. You're actually really cute. You're actually really cute. Target. Target. I think I've probably got enough. These horses all have different purposes, different experience, and have different personalities and motivations. They're all at different stages in their training, and all of them are new to clicker training and target training. But it just goes to show that clicker training can be used on any type of horse. So by using completely different horses as examples, it's very interesting to see how they process things differently and how their learning and cognition changes. It's interesting to compare how they learn and how they respond to different cues and what motivates them as a reward. So I hope this video has provided an insight into the beginning of clicker training with all 3 of these horses and how it can develop as they progress further.